Um, Welcome everybody to the April 8th CVTA Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Ms. Scott, if you could just please do the roll call and certify a quorum.
Yes, give me just 1 minute. There's a couple more people coming in still. Okay. Town of Ashland, Miss Amos,
Here.
Miss Ragland. Charles City County, Mr. Mitchell, Miss Russell. Chesterfield County, Vice Chair Smith,
Here.
Miss Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne,
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunez,
Here.
Mr. Hardman. Henrico County, Mr. Yor
Here.
and Miss Meidler. Here. New Kent County, Miss Inman,
Here.
Miss Leduc. Powhatan County, Mr. Shardine. City of Richmond, Chair Clark.
Here.
GRTC, Mr. Adarqua,
Here.
Miss Robinson.
Here.
Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
RMTA, Miss Dean. DRPT, Miss Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Wagner.
Here.
VDOT, Mr. Totten. Mr. Riblet.
Here.
Miss McAdory. And Virginia Port Authority, Miss Nelson.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Awesome. Next item, I did notice that the agenda had for the action item under GRTC recommend acceptance of 2024. I do think that needs to say 2025, correct?
That's correct.
Yes,
Okay, so I guess, do we have a motion to change that to 2025 on the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, second.
Oh.
Thank you, Austin. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Do we have any other considerations of amendments to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 4, approval of the March 11, 2024 meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval. Barb.
Thanks, Barb.
Second, this is Nora.
Thank you, Ms. Amos. All those in favor, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, let's move forward to the public comment period. Do we have any citizens signed up via email, online to speak today on anything on the agenda? Hearing none. I don't. We do? Let me see.
I'm sorry. No, we have not. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I took silent as none. I don't have a chair's report today. Moving on to GRTC Regional Public Transportation Plan. Is that going to be Ms. Torres or Mr. Adakwa?
It's gonna be me.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right, thank you.
Frank, would you like to share your screen or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna share and please let me know when my screen pops up.
Okay. We can see it.
You can see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks. All right, just a quick one here. All right, so thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks everyone. So this is pretty much to give you an update on our regional public transportation plan. As we all know, the state legislation directs GRTC to develop a regional public transportation plan, and this is something that has to be done in collaboration with the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization. And this is also an annual requirement that helps GRTC identify how it intends to spend CVTA funds in upcoming fiscal year. So today, pretty much our objectives here are very simple and straightforward. One is to give you an update on the service changes that we had in FY24. And we also want to give you an update on the service plans or priorities that we have for FY25. And then finally, to inform you of how we intend to use CVTA funds for FY25. In the end, our recommendation will be for CVTA to support GRTC's FY25 Regional Public Transportation Plan. All right, so this is a high-level summary of the FY24 service improvements that we had. For the polls, we restored service back to pre-pandemic levels. For 1A, what we did was to extend to Westchester Commons, and then also the Sunday service headway was improved to 30 minutes. For Route 19, you see that coming up here twice. It's because there were a couple of things done and the funding sources for those things were different. So the extension into Goochland County was cost neutral, so Goochland didn't have to pay anything. But the service span and then the headway changes on it was funded with I-64 funds. Route 93 was taken out of service and replaced with the Azalea Microtransit Zone. And then we also were able to implement the Cloverdale as well as the Powhatan Microtransit Zones. Details of all of these changes are in this presentation, which I have shared with Chet. So anybody that wants to get the details of all of this can get that from Chet. For FY25, these are what we have prioritized, based on the regional public transportation plan. For Route 1, we intend to extend Route 1 north on Brook Road to J Such, and then at some point we intend to extend it further to the Virginia Center Commons. Route 7A and 7B. There will be some level of routing and headway changes to provide a more direct service to the Richmond International Airport. And with that route as well, the weekday and midday headways will be improved to 30 minutes. We are also looking at implementing the Sandstein, the Broadrock and Cherry Gardens, as well as the Montrose and White Oak Village micro-transit zones. For Route 5, we're looking at extending this on Grove Ave and 3 Chap Road all the way to the University of Richmond, and this will be replacing Route 77. So the Route 5 what it's going to do is pretty much do the span and headways that the 77 currently does. And for Route 50, we want to improve the span and the headway on that. You can see that in the funding sources for 5 and 50, we haven't budgeted anything for that. Even though these are priorities that we have identified for FY25, we're still trying to look at how to get money to do this. If things don't go the way we anticipate, we probably will have to push this to FY26. So in terms of our priorities or how we intend to use the CVTA funds, this is pretty much what it looks like. One, we want to ensure that we maintain stability of operations as well as capital requirements as we currently have it. We also want to prioritize the piloting of the microtransit zones. We want to continue advancing the planning studies to improve operational and capital projects. And then we also want to leave room to prepare for expansion as well as any sort of innovative initiatives that may come up in FY25. So just a quick one here. For FY24, GRTC received the funds GRTC received from CVTA was 30.8 million, and we use 24.5 and then 24.5 on transit operations, as well as $1 million that was put towards capital projects. So we have about 5.3 million that is remaining, and what we're asking is for the CVTA to keep this in a restricted reserve for GRTC for future use. For FY25, we are looking at receiving about 32.2 million. All the changes that all the service priorities that have been identified for FY25 are going to be funded with FY24 money. So what we're asking is for the CVTA to also reserve the FY25 funds for us to be able to access that in the future. Like I said, if you want to get details of all the changes that I've talked about, you can kind of run through them in the slides. But that brings me to the end of my presentation today, and I will take any questions.
Barb, I see your hand up.
Yeah, on the tables where you would say routing, span,
Right.
what does span mean?
Oh, it's the hours of operation.
Hours of operation.
Yes, well.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Mr. Parsons?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank, just for people who may not understand what the funding source is, can you talk about the I-64 funds?
I don't know if Adrian is on the call, but I'll, if I can defer that to her to talk a little bit about the I-64 funds. I'm not really familiar with that.
I would kick it to Tiffany.
No, it's okay. So just thank you, Chet. And let me know if you can't hear me. I have a new webcam. But the I-64 funds come from primarily from VDOT. They did a series of interstate studies, corridor studies for like I-64, 95, and 81. And as part of that study, they identified key projects that were not necessarily focusing on capital improvements, but operational capacity improvements. And so the projects that GRTC identified, they were from their previous TDP, and I think they had 4 projects total that received I-64 funding. And so it includes roughly, I think, if I remember off the top of my head, includes about anywhere between 1 to 3 vehicles for each service project or route, and then up to, I think, 3 years of operating. And the study itself went through sort of a smart scale evaluation to determine what projects would receive that funding. But this is dedicated funding for projects along the I-64 corridor.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
And Frank, I have one more. I have a question.
Sure.
I'm trying to find it. Well, it was. Oh, okay. So I don't see it on mine, but I think you have in your slide deck where you talk about the FY24 and 25 funds, the remainder amount. Can you put that slide back up for me? I'm sorry.
Sure. All right, give me a second.
I just want to make sure I'm looking at it right.
Yeah, I think the first number, Dorena, should have said 2024.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it should have said
Received.
2024.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
For that. Right. Yeah.
And so that's the amount that's received that will be used in FY 2025.
FY25, correct. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then from that, because you're not using all of it,
All
there's
of
a
it.
remainder of 24.
Right.
And then in 25, you're projecting 32.2.
That is correct.
That will be used for 26.
Correct.
Yeah, and that just, this is Chet, the 32.2 comes from the projections that we received in December.
Got it.
Yep.
All right, so as we can see, it does look like we're doing better than previous years where we were just maintaining. We are starting to see some growth here. And GRTC has brought this item to the TAC to move forward to, do you guys usually go to the finance committee or do you go straight to the board?
It
In the past, it's gone straight to the board, but I'd like to put it in front of the finance committee too next week or Wednesday. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was about to say Wednesday.
But the
Okay, do you have it
recommendation.
on the agenda,
recommendation
Chet, for,
from-
let me check the agenda.
It is. It's on the agenda, but the recommendation from TAC would be for the full authority.
Did you say it was on the agenda or it's not on the finance committee? I don't see it. So will it be an FYI for them that, or do you want me to give it in the TAC update? What do you want to do there? Or have GRTC present something?
I guess I was thinking it would be in the TAC update, but
Okay, got it.
just for concurrence.
Okay. Got it. All right, so do we have a motion?
I have a
Uh,
question, Madam Chair.
Oh, you have a question? Sorry, Amy.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
okay. That's all right. So we just received this presentation. So I'm just trying to make sense of the numbers and kind of what's going on here. So it looks, so am I seeing this right that you received or you're programming 30 million for fiscal year 25? Is that the
No.
number?
No, it is supposed to read FY24. That was what we received for FY24.
30
Right.
million for FY 24. So what was the number for FY 25?
It's 32.2.
Okay, so you went up a couple. So, all right, so you do this annually. So next year you'll be doing this again, and I'm assuming we'll want to discuss with you the sort of introduction of commuter bus to Bottoms Bridge and potentially on out for Charles City.
Okay.
I don't know if Charles City is on right now, but we've had conversations previously about getting express bus out here. So probably in the next cycle, we're going to want to discuss that. I mean, I see New Kent has contributed a little over 2 million over the last couple of years.
Sure.
So, we're assuming that that's going to be something that can go towards supporting this commuter bus that we want to do next fiscal year, most likely. And then also, I think in the next fiscal year, or when you're doing your planning for next year, we're going to want to have a better understanding of your frequency coming east. I guess, is it to 7 Mile? Is that what it's called, 7 Mile?
It's called what again, Amy?
Pardon?
What was you said you want to see frequency go where?
Increased frequency out to, is it 7 Mile or the connection that we try to make in Henrico?
Not sure.
Okay. We talked about it in the microtransit discussion
Okay.
that we had. But making sure that we have better frequency so that our microtransit, and not even our microtransit, but our Bay transit service will have better connectivity into the GRTC system. So it's going to be important that frequency is something that's going to be meaningful connection.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's something that we can sit there and talk about it and see what the analysis will show, see how feasible these things are and how much it's going to cost us to implement that.
Okay, because this year we weren't communicated with on this plan except for the microtransit, which we declined because we had Bay Transit and there wasn't a way for GRTC to collaborate with Bay Transit. So we made that fundamental decision, but we weren't sort of communicated with on this plan. So if this is supposed to be a regional plan, New Kent should be involved in those conversations going forward. I guess that's my point here.
Definitely, sure.
Okay,
All right,
thank
very
you.
much.
And thanks, Amy, for that, because I was thinking, we didn't even reconvene the public working group to discuss it. So we probably want to do that prior to next year as well. I think that's where we can get that communication. And then finally to Amy, other question to Adrian. Has the express that she's talking about and any of the frequency, is that in the TSP update that you all are completing or middle of? And that's an undertaking that's required by the state?
Off the top of my head, I can answer that question. I'll have to go back and take a look at it because there's just a lot going on in there. But Adrian is on the call, so I don't know if
Yeah.
she.
I would say the route she's referring to is actually the 7s, if you go back up, and that's the 2 that we're actually increasing in
Okay,
Oh,
okay, good.
in October. So those will
So it
be,
was Route 7.
yeah, the 7 Nancy. So those
Okay.
will end up having when they overlap, they'll have 15-minute service, but all the way to the stop you're talking about, they'll have 30-minute service. So that's a lot better.
Okay, no, that's great. Yeah, if it's not in the TSP, and again, that's something that we haven't been coordinated with, we would like to be, so we understand when that is going to be coming online. I know, VDOT's working hard to get that park and ride lot finished, and we also are trying to put get our application in for the little bus stop that we're going to put in there. But it's going to be ready to go, and we want the bus to be ready. We want the commuter bus to be ready when that is open. Thank you.
Thank you. Chet?
To the few comments that were just made just now, I can work with Miles to activate the public transportation work group. That's actually a TPO work group. But this fits with the legislative direction of working with the TPO to develop the plan, the regional public transportation plan. So we'll coordinate it internally and get that worked out for the next cycle.
And if I can jump in, Madam Chair, as well, this is also on the TPO TAC agenda for tomorrow. So it's coming through on that side. And then to Ms. Emmons' earlier comments, we also have the rural study on the TPO end, which will tie in those rural connections back into the GRTC network. So that would help to align with the future update as well.
Okay, and hopefully, I know Bay Transit also has an application in for study for improving service, or getting our recommendations for improved rural service with Bay Transit. So hopefully that's going to be coming in. All of these things will come together to hopefully coalesce into a nice regional service with multiple providers.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right, I know some of you want to see the solar eclipse. So do we have a motion to recommend acceptance of the 2025 GRTC Regional Public Transportation Plan?
Madam Chair, I'll make a recommendation to approve it.
Thank you, Ms. Inman. Do we have a second?
Sharon Smidler, second.
Thank you, Sharon. Just on this cool item, can we do a roll call vote?
Yes, ma'am. 1 second. Miss Amos? Miss Amos?
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Goyne?
Aye.
Mr. Vidunez?
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Yor?
He had to step away. I'm filling in. Aye,
Okay.
Sharon Smidler.
Thank you. Miss Inman?
Aye.
And Chair Clark?
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 8, locality standard project agreements or SPA agreements. Henrico County has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, assuming those are from the round 3 regional round. Do we want to, I think this is just legality, all of these, well, I'll let
And Madam
Sharon explain
Chair,
to me what they are.
yeah, I can take this. So these are
Okay.
actually round two.
Okay, round two.
Round two projects. These are partially executed, so Henrico County has already taken action, and the request is to put that in front of the full authority at its next meeting to get these 5 spas fully executed so that Henrico can start working on the projects and processing the reimbursement request with us.
Okay. And I know the city will be coming with a lot too, hopefully next month. So remind everybody to get their approval of their spas in, if they do have one from round 2 or 3, please. And so with that, these are the round 2 projects that Henrico would like to begin to move forward. If no one has any specific questions regarding these already approved projects by the authority, we would entertain a motion to recommend approval of these 5 Henrico County spas by the CVTA at its next meeting. Is there a motion?
Sharon Smidler, make a motion for approval.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vadunas and Sharon. We have a motion and a second. I guess we can do roll call.
All right. 1 second. Miss Amos,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Goin,
Aye.
Mr. Vadunas,
Aye.
Miss Smidler,
Aye.
Miss Inman,
Aye.
and Chair Clark.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, regional framework parking lot list. We've tried to make this more manageable. So we're gonna try to touch on 3 items. I'll turn this over to Chester Walker from Chesterfield to lead this discussion.
Thank you. Let's see, work your computer. Oh goodness, y'all don't want to see that. Hold on. Okay. Y'all can see my screen, yes? All right.
Yes.
Okay, so reconvening on our parking lot items, we had our last meeting March 11th, and that was kind of a brain dump of a list of items that we wanted to revisit post this last round of project selection. So as Diana mentioned, today we want to take our 40 minutes to pull out these 3 bullets here for discussion for today. I'll close out with a list of our other items, but today we want to focus on 3 bullets specific to project selection, because that's obviously kind of the most consequential part of, the framework document is selecting projects. So first, we want to tackle a discussion today on, and let me back up by saying I was supposed to send out my notes from my PowerPoint from the last meeting, so I apologize for that. I'll get out this PowerPoint today to y'all. But is to consider authorities' priorities as it relates to considerations for regional benefit in the process, adjusted funding requests, how do we account for readiness in the process, leveraging, and how much do we consider locality support for a project as part of our project selection process. So we'll go through each one of these. And the goal of the framework, again, is meant to define our process on how we get to selecting our projects consistent with the code. And we were saying, we had a discussion about keeping in mind that we would like our process to be flexible. And then, so the question today is, we'll talk through these 5 points, and do any of these considerations warrant revisiting and adjusting the language in the framework? And then we'll talk about how the schedule relates back to fleshing out these priorities. So I'm just going to jump in. So again, do any of the items, these regional priority, do any of these considerations warrant us updating the framework document? So if we start off with regional benefit, so we had talked about, we have per the code, framework document, scores and ranks projects based on benefit cost rankings. Last round, there was a lot of consideration given to the first flush of project scores didn't address regional impact to the degree that the authority would want it to. So there was discussion about how do we, should the framework document address that regional benefit component? And I'm just throwing out jumping off points for everybody to react to. One of those points related to regional benefit is that we could provide regional benefit only rankings along with our benefit cost rankings at the time that the scores come out for TAC and others to review. And then work, but do we need to update the framework document to memorialize that? That's the first consideration, regional benefit and how much to document that, or do we keep flexibility in mind, provide those scores, and then let the process kind of move forward from there? Thoughts? Hey, Chet.
Thanks. Just to remind everybody, we do have, obviously, if we're calculating BC rankings already, we have the benefit built in. So that is already something we do. And this round 3, we presented both, but obviously put the focus on the cost benefit because that's what the code says. So I think what you're proposing is functionally something we've already got at our fingertips.
Okay.
Ms. Inman?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, does the code say that it has to be a 50-50? Does it have to be a straight up benefit cost, or can it be weighted? That might be one way of sort of, weighting the benefit over the cost. The regional benefit, I think, is what everybody's really after, but the code says we got to do the benefit cost. But is there anything that says that, we're stuck with that, or could it be a weighted?
The code, I'll just jump in. The code says you have to consider cost benefit. That's all.
Yeah,
so it just says consider.
Yeah. So I guess then, is it possible to weight the regional the benefit, right? In that benefit cost to have a little better balance. I mean, I think clearly everybody was not comfortable with the results of the straight up benefit cost. It just didn't provide what people expected, or maybe what the region really needs. I'm throwing that out for discussion.
Yeah. And Barb, you got your hand raised. Sorry, Darren, I'm taking over your.
I think that might be an interesting exercise to go through to see how you might come up with some sort of formula that factors in benefit only in addition to the benefit cost. Sort of like VDOT did with Smart Scale this round, when they were making changes, they showed how things would look with those changes. And, so maybe we could get Chet and Miles to give us a couple of scenarios of how that would look.
I have one more question. Is this sort of normalized on something? I can't remember. Was it normalized on total cost? or how is it normalized? Because that's where you see those big, you know, like swings. So like the larger projects that have huge costs, they have, you know, benefits, but then their score isn't, you know, necessarily where people think it should be because it's just, you know, sort of dwarfs the program. So is there a way to normalize that? We did that on the performance-based funding allocation model at DRPT when we were doing that, to get away from those huge swings between WMATA and something like Chincoteague, right? So we normalized it based on ridership. Have we done that here? Something that's consistent with everything?
Sure. So the benefit scores are all across each performance measure are normalized among themselves. So when you're looking at, I forget, like person throughput, just as an example, it's all of the project's person throughput compared, and then highest and lowest is the range for normalization. So that's 1 to 100, and then you multiply that by the weight of that measure. So there's normalizing for each of the performance measures, and then at the end, everything is normalized by cost in tens of millions of dollars, which is the same approach as Smart Scale.
So each measure within each measure, and then rolled up, again, it's normalized with cost.
So that really didn't help us. The normalizing didn't help us in this case. So maybe those aren't, maybe that's not the right normalizing factor. You know what I mean? Maybe cost isn't, I don't know.
Well, could we can maybe Miles and Chet get together offline and see if we could think through some options here with ways to consider, like Amy's saying. Is that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
And what do we think about, I don't know, like when we talk about the benefit, because I remember somebody talking about waterways, and then I was thinking about like the airport, and then of course the port has already kind of linked on to a locality. But are we thinking like check off boxes that add points potentially, like you know, like how that trickling, what it really impacts? And I know everybody's gonna have their own, but do you know what I mean? Like something that, you know, helps the port, the waterway, the two localities. You know what I mean? I just don't know, other than when the person or the authority member at the table, what's important to them. And then of course they'll be able to tell whatever that story is. But again, how do we measure it? So yeah, I agree that we should try and see if we can play with it a little to see what happens. Chet?
I like where you're headed, but I think this is one of those times where we want the framework to be as flexible as possible. So trying to tie what will probably be pretty unique, maybe cool projects to some type of data set might be a challenge, where we could get to the authority level or the finance committee or even the TAC and have the discussion that, you know, this project may rank in the bottom third, but it's still a priority for the region, so we're going to support funding it anyway.
Yeah,
that's going to happen every round, right?
Yeah, I agree.
But doesn't that happen anyway? I mean, that's independent of the methodology, but to me, the goal is to make the methodology as sound as possible so that you know, putting the board in a position of funding a project that doesn't rank is rare, right? We don't have to go back and reshuffle the deck and, you know, completely against what the methodology has said.
Well, and I think that the discussion is centered around what is the balance? You know, how much can we define very distinctly versus kind of the regional way of kind of working through it. So let us chat on the benefit only piece if there are other ideas. Normalization, that's a different topic. Scoring unique projects, that's another, we have some scoring bulleted items later. We can revisit that. Are we good with coming back and looking at some options for weighting benefit for consideration?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. So another consideration is considering adjusting your funding requests. I guess last round, we went through, y'all had the marathon of trying to figure out how to get there, and everyone kind of worked together to figure out how to adjust their requests based on the directive of here's how much we have, and basically highlighting that there's this iterative process that we always keep, that we wanted to allow for and we were anticipating when we wrote the document, which is already in there, that we have this process that, but then we acknowledge that it's iterative. So the thought throwing out to the group is, again, memorializing step by step that we're going to be able to adjust your funding request. And we kind of are, well, not kind of, it's already in there. And maybe we just need to make sure that we allow time for that iterative process to take place, because that's kind of what happened this last round. Was we were bumping up against getting a scenario out for public review. We needed to go back to finance at the same time. We were working up against the smart scale, end of March needed to be done. And so we kind of were compounding all of that iterative needing to work through it in a limited amount of time. So I don't know if the framework document needs to be adjusted, but we do have a schedule before us to review that allows for some more time for the iterative part of the process. So I don't know what you guys think about that, because what we have right now, it's not a lot of text, but it does say when you get down to step 4 right here, allocations are developed based on the following. Some steps may be iterative until you can get to a consensus, which is essentially what happened last round. So thoughts, Barb?
Yeah, I think that that was really our intention when we wrote the framework, is that we wanted to have discussion, and we've just we're just trying to get our feet under ourselves with this whole process, and improving the schedule for more time to allow us to have more discussion, ask more questions. I think it's going to help address that issue.
And we'll talk about the schedule here in a second. So again, where we had questions on scores, we didn't have enough time to ask questions about our scores. Where we had talked about readiness and people trying to understand where everyone was with their project, there could be time to discuss that. There was a lot of those sorts of things that we hopefully this having more time in the schedule to talk can get us to coalesce around a consensus better than when we rush it. So, but I did want to mention this consideration because that was something we heard from the authority. I'm going to keep rolling. Number 3, okay, project readiness. So that was another consideration for project selection. And we talked about brainstorming on, okay, how would we define readiness? How would we account for that in our framework document, in our process? And we talked about readiness being defined as, one way to define it as depends on your funding source. And we've been focusing on smart scale a lot. But there are other, like we talked about last meeting, there are other funding sources that you may want to leverage your CVTA funds for. And then there was, needing to readiness as it relates to you have an EDA project that comes up and, having super, I don't want to say restrictive, that's not the right word, but having, very detailed readiness requirements may not allow you to respond if you have something like an EDA project come up. So I'm throwing out to the group again on readiness and the consideration. And again, how do we want to account for that? Is it already being accounted for in the iterative discussion? Or do we need to revisit the framework and memorialize readiness more concretely? So, Amy, I see your hand up.
Okay, okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
I do think readiness absolutely is, you know, sort of grant specific, right, or program specific. So maybe whenever the application is being submitted, you identify what is, what is considered project readiness. So if you're going for, if you're trying to leverage new starts or small starts, that's a whole nother process, right? I mean, you've got to be pretty far along if you're gonna say you're ready for that, right? I mean, there are, points of decision making that involve, the different people and different processes. But by and large, the SMART scale, I think, is pretty straightforward, right, in terms of what is project readiness. And given the fact that that does kind of change, maybe it needs to be that staff, that CVTA on every round, they actually consider that for each application, right? So for each application that they receive for funding, they consider what source, these funds are going to be leveraging, and then what are those criteria, and then give sort of a readiness up or down, right? Just to keep it flexible. But also, I think it needs to be that obviously is something that is very important.
So sponsors include, when they're seeking CVTA regional funds,
Include what they're going to leverage,
what they're going to,
if you're going to leverage FTA money, or you're going to leverage USDOT or federal highway type money, then those are certain application readiness criteria that you kind of have to meet, right, in order to be considered, because those are pretty competitive programs.
Right. And then, so we say what our plan is, how we plan to leverage, and what source. And then that's just something, that's a data point or a piece of information when we're having these discussions that we will have handy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's not assume that it's just SMART scale. It can be whatever program, but those programs have criteria.
Right. I'm sorry. Got it. Provide leveraging plan or consider. Yeah. So based on what you're going after, because you're right, some funding sources like Smart Scale are very, very specific. Some readiness requirements and others are not. And then we can have a discussion of how ready are you for based on what you're planning to do.
Right.
Okay. Does that sound good, everybody? I guess that's just something I can figure out later if I need to add text for the framework or not. That's something I should probably add, right?
Might be something, maybe the framework should have as an appendices a sample application. And we could have, modify the application to show some checkboxes that you would check or write in if your fund source isn't in that.
Yeah, this is Chad. I was waiting to be called on.
Sorry, I'm not managing that.
I think I like the idea, and I think it should. I'm not convinced the framework should be updated.
Okay.
Because I don't want to get in the habit of trying to list all the possible sources. But I think that the application should possibly be expanded, like you're saying, to include the opportunity for the applicant to provide the detail that the applicant knows about. We're going after X grant or X funding source, and we're 60% ready. and here's why. So I think that that would be an update to the application itself that wouldn't be a huge lift and would still give the framework the flexibility that we're trying to get.
Does that seem like a good compromise? Barb's got thumbs up. Miles, or wait, sorry, Austin, did I skip you?
No, it's fine. I guess the only thing that concerns me is the conversation at TAC when we go to approve or I guess recommend the funding scenario. Are we then going to delve into a conversation about whether or not each application is ready for what you're going after, like Smart Scale or Safe Streets for All or whatever you're applying for otherwise? I guess I don't necessarily know if it's this body's job to do that. I certainly think it makes sense to do some level of analysis on it as far as, or at least have some discussion on what you're going for and making sure that the applicants are aware that they have to meet the readiness requirements of whatever other pot they're seeking. But that's my concern is I don't want it to delve into, well, I don't think your application's ready for Smart Scale, so you don't get the 5 million or whatever. That's all.
Yeah, I think the way it plays out is that we have a jumping off point, and when we work on it and work on it. And when we get to a point where we don't agree, we're looking for separators to then make a decision.
Yeah.
And then
No,
we
I
would,
get it.
but yeah, I hear you.
Miles put a note in the chat.
Oh, what did Miles say? Say it, Miles.
I can read it. So the application currently has a question. If you say that you are leveraging, that says describe your intended funding strategy, including additional funds, expected decision timelines, and year of complementary funds. And then it notes that the funding programming will be aligned with the complementary fund source. So if you're going for Smart Scale, we'll try and line it up to maximize your Smart Scale position. So we have that information. It wasn't something that we
we
used
just
in the process, but we do collect that currently.
Okay. So we already have it. Just needed to use it. All right.
Yeah, I just one little comment. So for Smart Scale, at least, it was a requirement, right? So if your project's not ready, I mean, you're not even going to make it through the screening process. So people have to be honest about that, right? Otherwise, you're tying up leveraging funds for another project that is ready to go. And I don't think would ever intend to do that. But, if you're trying to just amass money, well, you're not going to get screened in. So, if your project doesn't meet their screening criteria, at least for Smart Scale, the other programs, those other federal programs are very competitive, right? I mean, those are relatively small dollar programs for, that are oversubscribed. So you have to be pretty spot on in your application to be successful, to have an award. But the same is true if you're just trying to get leverage money for some giant infra type project and you're nowhere near that, then don't be tying up the money. Wait until you're ready.
Barb, I think you're up too. Next.
I was wondering what people thought about having VDOT and DRPT sort of be the referee and kind of saying whether they think applications for funding programs that they monitor are ready or meet readiness. That would be harder with federal programs, but we might be able to find someone that could do it for those as well. I think nothing is ready for federal grants. That's my experience. That's we can't get any.
One thought that I just had is, I think the refereeing thing might be tough. I do agree that would be helpful if we could figure out a way to make that work, but I think this would include or require, a revision of the framework, but something along the lines of if you say you're leveraging for Smart Scale, some federal grant or whatever, but you're screened out because of readiness, do you not get those funds for a second cycle? Is that kind of the risk put on that? I don't know how to, that was just a thought I had, but probably a revision of the framework is needed for something like that.
I'd be
And-
nervous about that.
Yeah, and
'cause-
if I would add, remember, Austin, and this is just what I keep in mind when I think about the framework, is once it kind of goes over to a locality, it's
Mhm.
like, it's hard. Even in using the Goochland case, moving it from one to
Right.
another, it's kind of like localities want some of that. They create ownership, although it may not be theirs. And so I think it's gonna be a little a tight walk when I'm not quite sure what VDOT or DRPT could put in to the input, or how much power or legality that's going to have in the process. And then for the leveraging, I don't know so much is it a plan, even when the feds ask you what are your other sources, it's more of a table than it is a plan. It's, I'm applying for this from you, I'm expecting to apply from this from somewhere else, and so forth. So again, I don't know how much of a plan, because all of it is hopefulness. You know what I mean? None of it. In some cases, there are already committed funds. So I think in something, I don't know so much again a plan, but something, I just see a table, and you have, if it's leveraging, either anticipated funding source or already committed funding source. And again, that question becomes, is the authority even going to get to that level to say, oh, hey, this project is leveraging a lot of dollars, we should include this. So again, let's think about how much the authority members are going to go into these details, or are they going to go into, they want whatever project they want selected. And that's just equating to the flexibility language.
No, I get it. What I'm trying to avoid, like I said originally, is us, when it comes time for the funding scenario, having two counties go back and forth, that one thinks my project's ready for smart scale, and I think I'm going to meet all the readiness check boxes, and somebody doesn't think that's the case, and then discussion ensues, and it really gets into the weeds where it doesn't need to be. And I'm not certainly claiming every idea I have is a good one.
No. I think that's a great point that you're making, because I agree with you in that. But as we saw, we had a tough time with the round 3. And while we weren't so much talking about readiness, we were like talking about bringing your dollars down, everybody like proportionally bringing dollars down. So again, it's either, because like, for example, with me, I know when they posted we were going to have 151 million, I was like, well, I'm not going to apply for 96 million or 100 million, because that's more than, 3/4 of the pot. But other people didn't think that way.
Right.
Nope.
And it skewed everything. It really skewed.
Yeah. And so either we're going to have like, a project limit request, or we're going to have the same thing where people are going to apply for what they want. And then we have to negotiate down.
And if I can just jump in real quick, and just an observation on this last one, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but it did kind of feel like it was everybody needs a chicken in the pot type thing. Right. So, I mean, we were giving money to projects that didn't score on benefit or cost benefit. Right. So just because I felt like we wanted, everybody to have something, and which is fine if that's the way it is. But then that means other projects that did score well and really should have probably had full funding, or at least close to full funding, didn't. And in lieu of having projects that maybe didn't rank. So I guess that's another, just not right or wrong, but it is what it is kind of thing.
The whole chicken in a pot exercise is something that is definitely outside of the framework.
Yeah.
And kind of the mantra of the authority, since its creation, has been trying to make sure everybody around the table is getting something. So we were sort of in a position where we were stepping away from the technical side.
As TAC,
and really negotiating on behalf of the authority.
Yeah.
So I think that whole exercise we need to kind of keep separate outside of the framework document because it isn't technical.
I agree, Barb, 100%. And I frankly, I did hear that back from my member, is that, we shouldn't be doing their work, right? And that kind of is maybe where we were dabbling at that point.
Yeah, once it came back from finance
Yeah.
with a new number to budget to, they kind of put it on TAC at that point to do some of that
Right, agreed.
non-TAC
Agreed.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, yeah.
And
That's
other than that, to me, I mean, the process went exactly as it should, so to speak.
I think so too.
We followed to the letter of the document. It went to finance. They had recommendations for changing it. Certainly, I don't expect there to be wholesale changes to that degree every round. I certainly hope. That was exhausting. But I expect there to be changes every time.
Right.
But I do think we maybe had a unique scenario this round that we hope to not have again. Maybe it's not necessarily
Wishful thinking.
I'm an optimist. I'm usually an optimist.
Every round has a unique scenario.
The fact that
That
there's
is fair.
smiles all around the
is fair.
screen right now proves that we were able to get there. So
Yeah. But I do think it worked as it should for the most part, but I didn't think it was the best idea for us to do the political side of it.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
the same issues right now with some things going on in Goochland. It's the political stuff's where it shouldn't be.
Mhm.
So I think what I'm hearing as it relates to readiness and the framework, we all are agreeing that, again, information providing on what your plan is, which we're asking already, is already accounted for.
Chad, I have a question for you. Thinking about readiness, do you guys already, when an application's submitted, look at if certain things are submitted with it, or can somebody get funding if the estimate's just on like the back of a napkin?
More likely, the more data you submit, the better your chances are in terms of recommendations.
But there's no current checklist, so to speak, that you have the 6 required things for application. If you don't have all 6, like a sketch, cube, etc., then you don't even get considered for funding.
No, there's a screen out.
Okay.
We don't use the word screen out. We just
no.
If I can jump in, Chad, I can help. At the back of the application, Austin, it's there's a cost estimate is required for every application,
Right.
and then the cube, project sketch, and proof of any other funding. Those are the main ones that are required if you have a project that would be relevant to. And then everything else beyond that, like studies or anything else, is extra.
So there is a minimum bar, and if that's not hit, then the project is screened out more or less. Okay.
okay.
So
Mm.
Jessa,
Yes.
I was
Sorry.
thinking people weren't necessarily supportive of the second or third bullet.
Yeah. So we didn't really get much here, right?
So I will say we did have to refer to VDOT on Powhatan's project readiness because we really weren't sure, right? So, and everybody asked me about our project readiness, and VDOT had to step up and say, yeah, we've been working with them, and they're well on their way. So I mean, they did chime in on that. I don't remember if DRPT did, but definitely VDOT did, and I think Mark is on the phone, and we asked him a couple times specifically, is this project, where do you think it is? So I mean, and we took his his knowledge of those projects as
And we, yeah, and
So
we
So maybe it's just a
probably,
case by case thing, but we don't have to document it in the framework.
right.
I
If
think
we-
VDOT and DRPT both repeatedly said that they are willing to assist in however they can. So I think rather than have a required for everybody component of the framework. Obviously, we'll work with VDOT and DRPT whenever needed to make sure the projects are up to where they need to be.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So leveraging consideration of
Mark has
how,
his hand up.
oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yep, that's okay. Chet was actually 100% on target. We're certainly happy to provide whatever information would be helpful to an applicant or to CVTA in general. If there's something that we have that would be helpful, we're happy to do that. And if that's case by case, that's fine. It's whatever you guys need from us.
Cool. All right. So consideration of leveraging funds. So I know we had talked about the scorecards, adding that into the scorecards. So when people are seeing benefit costs and the rankings by category, they'll also know what the leveraging requests are. Again, this is similar to in my mind to readiness considerations. Like we need to kind of have an understanding. So when we get down the road in discussions, we have, again, more information to parse out when we have to differences and make tough decisions, but so that we have that information. I don't know if there's a way or other considerations in regard to leveraging that y'all think we should document in the framework or consider documenting. Putting any kind of restrictions or limitations or as it relates to leveraging as part of the process. I don't think so.
I only had a question about that.
Mhm.
Was it the CVTA board's sort of desire that the funding would be used as leverage, the regional money? I mean, I don't know if that was ever like formalized as a policy, or was that just kind of a, sort of, this is what we'd like to be doing?
It's kind of an understanding,
Okay.
but not a have to.
formalized.
You can request to fully fund a project, but everyone kind of, I think we even wrote it in here
Mhm.
as a broad understanding that we want to leverage, but mandate, not so much.
Right.
Barb, did you want to add on to
No, that's what I was going to
this
say.
one?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That it was definitely a motivating factor in establishing the authority was so that we would be more competitive in
Right.
smart scale, particularly.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So not much meat here, I don't think. I'm not hearing much of on the leveraging. Other localities support for the project. I'm like, oh, keep me out of, like, that's not a
Yeah.
technical. I know
I think
Amy
that
probably
needs
has
to come
something to say on that one. But that was a
I
consideration.
love you all, but I will say that when somebody steps up and says, I don't think so because I don't think so, I don't agree, then it's a personal, not a technical. And that did come into this last round. And I think that absolutely is not probably the best way of handling things.
Yeah, definitely don't want to document that as part of our formal.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll get up with Chet and Miles
I got some
on.
hands.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nora.
I speak to that. And maybe it's just not worded appropriately, but I think for some of our projects, between maybe Chesterfield and Henrico, or Richmond and Henrico, or Hanover and Ashland, or Henrico and Hanover, there are some projects that do provide a larger regional improvement, or that can help more than one locality. And I don't think that we should completely mark off if it's helping two localities, that having some type of consideration.
Yeah, and I remember we had this discussion when we were standing up the framework, and we considered that, like, that your project limits were physically overlapping between, what is it, 360 between Henrico and Hanover, but by definition, it's a regional project that serves everyone on those routes.
Yeah.
So then we punted that off and said, well, we're not gonna, because it's regional by definition, not just physically within your jurisdiction. Because 288 is wholly within Goochland and some of the projects, but it's a lot of Chesterfield people. So
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if Barb was up, but first, she might have been up
oh,
first.
go for it, Barb.
Yeah, I won't linger, but yeah, you know, if we had a project that was on a low volume road that still met eligibility right next to Powhatan, I don't, you know, just the fact that it's close to Powhatan doesn't necessarily mean it's regional or better. I don't know.
That's a
It
tough
might
one.
be something that you would better for discussion, I guess, in trying to explain why it is of benefit to more than one locality.
Like make a case,
Right.
a narrative,
Yeah,
but
you know,
not
we used
a.
to say we said that a lot in developing the framework
You
is
did.
make your case. Right. That's exactly right.
We kept bumping up against things that we could confidently document and felt strong about. And then there was all of these other things that were nuanced and required more than just a, documentation, and that would cover every scenario and every situation. So, Amy,
So,
did you?
yeah, I just want to, so when I was really talking with Miles and Chet about, sort of that regional benefit, what that meant, that's the regional model, right? So that to me is where you're seeing the regional benefit. So that benefit score is showing the regional benefit coming out of the model. So it's showing how that project is scoring in relation to the entire region, right? So in all of those different performance measures. So if you go and you look at each performance measures, it's not just based on your county, it's based on the regional
Right.
model. So to me, that's the benefit, right? You don't have to make a case for yourself because you're next to Hanover or you're next to Ashland or you're next to whomever. I mean, that's reflected in the regional model. So, and that took me some time to get my head around, and I spent some time, trying to understand that better. And it makes sense, right? I mean, that's the level playing field that we're on, and that's what should be respected. That model is what everybody puts everything into, right? We all put sort of everything into that model that's now being updated. So if you want your, your section of your model to look right, then you need to work with CVTA and the TPO on the update of that model that's happening. So to me, that is absolutely a technical piece that should be reflected in that benefit score.
Okay. All right. Time-wise, I think we're close. Those were the 5 measures. So I think the one that warrants some additional consideration is benefits, regional benefits. So we'll work on that. Schedule, y'all can't really read this, but review. So the other item on the agenda was to review the proposed schedule, and kudos to Chet for already pulling together and looking at the schedule and trying to build in some more time.
Yes, I've got something a little broader if you want me to share that.
Okay, well, broader
not broader, but looking at, both times, whatever, go ahead.
Well, no, you're good. I'll real quick. So again, ample time in the schedule will allow TAC, finance, and the authority to work through all of these considerations up above that we just talked about. Again, everything kind of was condensed and didn't allow us to, we kind of in haste had to kind of work through it. But if we can allow for as much time for all these nuanced things, then that's a good thing. So real quick before you show your shit. So for new project considerations, Chet pushed back. Let's see, you pushed back applications opening up in July. So we would have 2 months to submit our applications. And then it gives staff and consultants 3 months to vet our applications, do our third-party reviews, do the scoring they need to do. And then you start in December, TAC starts to review the score, We have another month to do our work together thing. So you've got 2 months of reviewing scores, asking question why the transfer station didn't score, why this normalized thing happened like this. Work through that. Shooting for TAC to work through that by January, February for public review, and then out to the authority to approve February, March. Keep in mind, again, I know Smart Scale is not the only one, but Smart Scale, we would have to have, I think the constraining for Smart Scale that constrains us is, again, we need to have our stuff done by the end of March because pre-apps open April 1st. And so we had talked about having 2 meetings in 1 month to try to, again, if right in here we need more time, then maybe it's, multiple meetings in this 2-month time frame to get there. So we don't bump up against that issue of recommended funding scenario, but we still had questions, and then we didn't want to approve it and all that. So, and it went back to finance. So we need time for all that, which finance is not in here, by the way.
I think they should be.
Yeah, we'll probably have to.
Yeah.
So Chet, I don't know, did you have something better to show? I was just working off of your Word document.
Yeah, let me,
So thoughts on the schedule? I don't know that we could back it up any further than July.
no, I don't think we want to do July. This is basically mirroring what Chessa proposed. Look at the second part first. So for round 4, I think one of the things that's going to change, and I may have talked about this with TAC before, is that we're going to work through a Planner VA is developing an on-call technical bench that will allow CVTA to issue task orders for cost estimate validation, which will speed up that process. That's been part of what's dragged us down the last 2 rounds. So I think that we may be able to get materials for the TAC wrap up
November
cost validation and then get it to TAC in November. So we could talk about it in November, December.
Yeah.
And then move towards the public hearing in February, like we did this year, so that we can get into pre-apps, because pre-apps are in March, right? They're not in April.
April 1.
April.
Oh, okay.
1st.
Well, then maybe we don't need to be this aggressive, but anyway, I think we can work it back, but going back to July 1 to start the cycle, I think is the right way to do it, just so we have a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah, I mean, I think February's right with you're working on pre-apps in March.
Right.
So that you can submit them.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first part here, just the off year, which is what we're getting ready to do, is I don't think we need to do something as formal, but I think we do want to have some guidelines that need to be developed.
Yeah, and I was going to
same kind of
table.
thing.
I was going to table this to another session, the off year, because it's a little more loaded.
Right.
I have a question.
Yep.
So this round, we did have sort of that iterative process where I understand they had to go do their procurement to do the cost estimates. That took some time. But can there be a parallel process where, all right, the consultants are doing their cost estimates while staff is doing the benefits, like the technical piece of that? And then, there needs to be a communication, either individual or as a group, on staff's recommendation, or at least your results, right, of the technical side of that, of the benefits. So I really think that would have streamlined a lot if we could have done those things simultaneously. I don't know that verifying the cost and waiting for the cost to be verified and then going into the technical, I don't know that you need that. Why can't those things happen together? Understanding staff's doing one, consultants are doing the costs, but I absolutely think that localities need to have that one-on-one, like we did with the cost validation, to understand what questions we might have, right, based on how you've scored our projects or what you've assumed as part of our projects. That was an important process, again, for me to understand you know, how our project scored and what was assumed so that we could get into an agreement and comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That might speed things up, streamline.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Chad. I mean, we're already doing that, but
You already
this-
are.
the first three rounds, we were focused on not making a recommendation until we had a cost benefit score. So if we're gonna pivot a little bit and put more weight on benefit, then sure, we can have a conversation concurrently
But the benefit
when the
isn't,
scores are developed.
okay, but the benefit, I understand the cost, the final cost benefit score, but the benefit score, that's something that you're generating, right? That's independent of the cost.
Yeah,
Right,
Yeah,
that's a
saying.
factor that's going in. So we should be able to, I understand that's not the final, but it would streamline things, you know, to have that conversation prior. And if you don't have the cost benefit number ready, to at least understand how you're scoring our projects.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm confusing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Amy's saying let's understand the benefit and get on board with the scores,
Right.
not the scenario. Not the scenario.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Everybody, I think, needs to have an opportunity to understand how their project scored and understand any assumptions that might have gone into that score. Because
Right.
staff is making those assumptions based on the information that we give them.
And so, Chet, what you just showed is we would get those scores in November instead of December, which is even better. I think you just showed that, right?
And that was what was originally
rushed.
That was the schedule for this year, for this last round, was November. We didn't get them until January or something.
Can we take some of the time in the staff 3 months just to have in that 3 months, that's where the TAC member review maybe can occur?
I think that we need to do the scoring in that 3 months. I think the TAC member review should happen in that first month that the TAC has the information, and then we come back in the second month with the changes.
Well, again, Amy is saying, so scoring review is different from recommendations.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So scores come out and go to TAC in November, and that's where TAC members can ask about the scores on their projects.
Right.
Okay.
But then we divide by cost. Well, sorry, let me back up. Chet, you correct me. November TAC is going to get benefit divided by cost and benefit. They get all of that in November for review.
No, we won't have
the
cost.
score. Just the
scores.
Okay. Okay. So then they ask questions, what's going on, they get clarity, and then we get divide by cost in when?
December.
And then okay. All right.
And I just text everybody that I have a 2:30. I don't know about anybody else's time.
Nope. We're good. That's all I had. We can clean up. Maybe we can
we
add
can
more
clean this up
detail
and
to
come
the
back.
schedule. Yeah.
Yep.
And then next meeting, I'm going to send this out. These are the other topics. So I'll highlight the next 2 or 3 for the May 13th meeting and send this out for everybody. And again, just reach out if you have other comments or things we didn't get to specific to these 3 topics, but cool.
Yeah, please send this out, please.
Mm-hmm.
Our next meeting is May 13th. Did any of our TAC members have any comments? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Chessa.
Tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your hard work, Chessa.
No worries.
Thank you, Jessica.